to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool, I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's the real one. I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take. Like, what's yours?
Protonic reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we're all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Episode 427. Second Protonic Reversal since I'm back from tour. So getting back in the swing of things, people. And it's an exciting one. This is one we've been talking about doing for a while, and we're actually doing it. So I'm anytime something takes a long gestation period, you know, it takes longer. But I'm very excited in mere moments, well, a minute at least, to talk to Mr. Al Johnson, U.S. Maple, Shorty, just an icon amongst freaks, nerds, and weirdos, such as myself. But before we do that, welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer that's been touring and recording for 25 years, most known for the band Conan, Neutron, and the Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but who may not be household names. This is episode 427. If this is your first time listening to the show, archives of it are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding, at ProtonicReversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at Patreon.com/ProtonicReversal will achieve that goal. And if you like the show or even just a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around on the internet, and even leave a review. All that helps people discover the show. It beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords. It's just a darn nice thing to do. Really. So, tonight's guest, one of the great 90s frontmen, I think we can say. Big fan of all his bands, and there's actually some news, which is great, because when I first was thinking about doing this a long time back, it wasn't that there was like something new to promote or anything. It's like, oh, that'd be cool to talk to this guy. And now there actually is some news. But I'm very excited to talk all things U.S. Maple, Shorty, so much more with Mr. Al Johnson. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much. 427. I wonder, I think those are my spirit numbers.
It's going to say, it could be your lucky lotto numbers, too, for all I know. You know,
something's got a gift, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've heard dumber things and recently. So. Yeah, I really missed an opportunity by not auctioning off like the pot number for somebody.
Oh,
you know,
right.
You know, I even had Brent Bjork on like not that long before. I was like, oh, that would have made a lot more sense for that guy. But I wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah, well, can't be everywhere at once, man.
I know. Let's go. I'll start them over from zero, and then I'll try it all again.
I do it about every 20 minutes.
Exactly. God, it feels like I do something this week, especially. Jesus Christ, yeah. I was feeling like weirdly, tacitly, I was feeling guilty about not doing Protonic episodes. I was like, what the heck? I'm talking about this is work.
Yeah, right.
Like I make it seem easy, but this is work. But we have actually been talking about doing this for a long time, and you know, I work on my own timeline, and I do a lot of other things, not the least of which is making records and touring myself. And really excited that we're getting together to do it now. I had no idea about this U.S. Maple reissue. None. And then I was like, oh, well, that's handy. I'm going to be talking to one of those dudes coming up. How long has that been in progress?
You know, I think Mark Fisher started talking about that. I mean, and this is to my recollection, and my long-term memory is no longer very good.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to say about a year ago, I think.
Okay. And so, of course, what we're talking about is the new Long Hair in 3 Stages.
Right, and it's 30 years old. So, you know, that's a chunk of time right there, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm like this old, confused, wandering relic walking the streets.
Well, I was thinking about this in terms of where I had been somewhere last. I was like, oh yeah, we were just there, and it was like, no, that was 7 years ago, Conan. I'm like, okay, well,
yeah.
I'll
What
see
time
myself
is it?
out into the grave.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Right.
okay. So the first album, the first proper U.S. Maple record is Long Hair. Right?
Yes.
Am I getting the timeline on that right? Because I have all these records, but it's whatever.
Yeah,
It's the Wild West.
that was our first full-length record. It was, for lack of a better term, produced by Jim O'Rourke.
Right.
It was done in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, at a studio called Solid Sound. That was our first big outing where, we didn't have to try and come up with the recording money on our own. We were with Skin Graft, and at the time they were Fluid, and it just
right.
It's just the beginning of a new chapter for us, really.
Well, so before we get into Long Hair, tell me, because I was not around for Shorty. I come in at things from the West Coast, so I was not familiar about Shorty until afterwards. But tell me the gestation of that. So it was Shorty and Mercury Players begat
the first
U.S.
band,
Maple, right? But that's Snailboy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, the first band that Mark and I were in was a band I put together called Snailboy. And it was Mark, myself, the original bass player from Tar, Tim Mesher, a real unique bass player, great, just a great musician he was, and our drummer Todd Lamparelli. And the reason why my first, and I've talked about this on another interview recently, my first big break, as a youngster coming up in this world, was that Lori Barbero from Babes in Toyland, because I think we had opened for them a couple of times up in Minneapolis. It'll take me a minute to remember the bar, but she knew us, she had seen us, so she wrote a letter to Long Gone John, or called him.
From Sympathy for the Record Industry,
yes.
Of course, yeah.
And that was our first release, that paid for release, where before that we had put a record out on John Moore's label from Tar. He had a label called No Blow. He was kind enough to let us put a single out on his label. That was our first official single. But in my mind, I think of our first official break, as a band, was this whole Lori Barbero, and then going to Sympathy, because at that time, I have no idea now what the perception is, but at that time, Sympathy, they had put out White Stripes singles and shit. I mean,
oh, absolutely. That's where I first heard of the White Stripes. Yeah.
He put so much stuff out that at some point, 2 or 3 of those bands are going to get mildly big, or potentially, atomic, like the White Stripes. So
it's a numbers game at that point.
It really is. It is for him, and if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and he was always putting out stuff that he would, he backed everything they put out. So
he did, and he liked it, and he wrote me a nice letter, and it was just, that gave me my first sort of warm glow. I felt a sense of accomplishment, and now we're on an actual label instead of just a friend putting your record out. You know what I mean? It was a big throning step for me anyway.
It's a vote of confidence. There's stakes in it that are beyond the people that are playing the music. There's something to be said for, that buy-in, money-wise and
there's
and
something
otherwise.
to be said, just that there's a narrative behind getting onto a label now versus where technology is. People, all they're doing is just shifting files back and forth. There isn't. Yeah. It's a little it's a little less personal now. I think the way things are done, and you don't get a lot of stories. And obviously, there's 100 million other stories that are way better than mine. That's just one that sort of led us somewhere and happened.
Right. So that's with Snail Boy, and that's the one. Butch Vig recorded that, right? Was
Yes.
that the one?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Again, who used to record noisy bands just for.
Yes,
for the
that's why I chose him. I insisted that we go record with Butch Vig after we hear the album Life of Crime by Laughing Hyenas.
Sure. Yeah.
The Laughing Hyenas are one of my favorite bands of all time. I mean, top 4 probably.
And that's a fierce sounding record. I mean,
it is. It really is, and it has a real live sound to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at that time, I was kind of singing in a more abrasive manner, kind of like John Brennan. I don't have the power. He's a singer. I'm more of a screamer or whatever, or yeller.
Yeah.
But I just felt like that he dealt really well with an abrasive element, and that's why I wanted to go there too. So it was a combination of those two things that he handled rougher stuff at the time. It was $450 a day for one locked out studio day at Smart Studios. That's laughable now, that rate.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, that's hey, find that in the couch cushions.
Yeah, I know, it's insane. It's insane.
So then, what's the timeline there? So that's like what, like 91.
Yeah.
Crazy time for music, by the way.
Right.
Like
sure.
there was some other stuff happening.
Absolutely.
Was that something that seemed like very far away, or is that something that was like, oh, hey, they're letting the freaks in for a minute? Okay.
Right. Exactly. I mean, things just seemed possible.
Yeah.
And it drove me. I mean, I had the mindset. I'm going, whatever this term meant, I'm going to make it. I am. It's just a matter of time and how I approach the speed at which we get there. But I knew we would get there,
Yeah.
That could just be machismo confidence. I don't know, but it's honestly how I felt. So there, it also lends itself to being determined. I was just determined.
You wanted
and
to
I
do
think
it.
I think there's a lot of the bands out there that lack someone in the band who's leading that band. They're not determined. Yeah. And because of that, they're going to get held back at different spots, and they're going to be scratching their heads wondering why.
Well, and then you're totally dependent on inertia as well, and inertia is a fickle physic.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me about the evolution, the change up into Shorty, because that's like 91 and 92, right?
Yeah, so I think we just, like I said, my memory's not fantastic, but that band just had sort of run its course, and we moved to 2 different places. Mark and I moved to Chicago, and the other guys stayed in DeKalb, Illinois, which is where that band started, right, at NIU.
Yeah.
And I knew that the band was essentially over at that point. I was starting to look around. All that great music was happening in Chicago. I was determined. Here's that word again. I was determined to put a band together.
Yeah.
And I did. And that was great. And I met Todd Rittman and Pat Sampson. I've known those guys for a few years prior, because we all lived in DeKalb, Illinois. We all went to NIU. We all went to the same parties. You'd go to a party, and you might see one of Todd. I see Todd's band playing a couple of times, if I recall. So that was sort of a DeKalb little music scene that was happening out there. And honestly, I wasn't a big fan of the Mercury Players. I just, for whatever reason, it just didn't strike me. But I am pretty good at discovering talent, I think,
Mm-hmm.
At least maybe that's another machismo statement, but I was I just wanted to grab those two because they were special within the context of that other thing that they were doing.
Well, and sometimes creatively the art itself may not be for you and your sensibilities, but you can still have appreciation of the artfulness behind it, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I have that all the time,
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Right.
which is the Yeah, this is pretty good. I don't respect the musicianship in any way, shape, or form. Peace and love in my heart. Peace and love.
Right.
Peace and love. But okay, so you got well, there's the singles before Thumb Days, just to not short sell Shorty, so to speak. And the Dynamite Lover single.
Okay, yeah. That was done. I believe that was done out of Madison, Wisconsin.
Right.
And the artwork's stupid. I hate it. I hate that record. I didn't want to do it. And the guy running that label, Bovine, I believe his name was Sean. Very nice guy, very cool guy. I just didn't want to bother with putting another single out. And he just one of these people that just kept after me about it. And it's just like, all right, let's figure something out and do it. And those kind of instances, if you're in a band, are crucial. You know, I mean,
yeah.
Don't put something out that you don't feel that great about. You know, I failed there. You know.
Yeah, and it's weird because I think, you know, there's the opposite end of it where people treat everything like the Library of Congress.
Yeah, true.
Right, but there's also, you don't want to be too flippant necessarily about what you're doing. And yeah, that's the B-side on that one. That was an eye opener too. I was like, oh, okay. What are these guys all about? That was my first introduction to Shorty.
Right. Yeah. I know. I mean, I think about it now, and you know, it's a little embarrassing and derivative, and you know, but I learned and improved along the way. Right. Absolutely. And you know, a lot of that had to do with just playing with a lot of bands, hanging around and knowing other musicians, and you know, asking them fair and honest questions and taking constructive criticism.
Did you get any criticism about the B-side title?
You know, there is a story behind that, but I don't want to cloud us up with a bunch of nonsense.
I mean, I'd be curious.
It's not an overtly racial thing. We used to practice out in the sticks in DeKalb, Illinois. The guy's basement we rented, it had literally live wild animals running around. There were like voles and rats, they'd skitter across the pipes. This was a literal hole in the ground, a burrow.
Okay.
And above it lived an old, wrinkly, he looked like an alien hillbilly, racist and stupid. But we were paying $50 a month rent, you know, and we were kind of stuck, you know, with this dude in this horrible place and this horrible man. But I was wearing a ball cap that I used to wear, and it had my grandfather made these fishing lures out of deer tail. He used to make his own fishing lures, and he would color them in like really bright colors like chartreuse or green or neon yellow or orange. So I took a bunch of these lures and I just hooked them into my cap. So it was kind of colorful and crazy looking. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that he said when he saw me is, "Where did you get that nigger head?" Oof. And that's what that song is about. The look on my face, the look on your face, and the look on my face is exactly how I felt.
Woof.
So I almost get knowing the truth, I almost get offended when people assume that there's some sort of anything racial behind it. I have more black friends than white friends.
Yeah, but that's also things taken out of context too, you know, and you know. When you hear the story, it's like, wow.
Blacks love me.
You and Donald Trump. Hey, everybody. And I forgot about Last One in My Mouth is a Jerk, too, which I was...
Yeah, I hate that title. It's so stupid. Oh, my God. Another one of those instances where I look back and say, you idiot.
Do you feel that? Do you feel that way about the Hot for Teacher and
let's go through all my failures.
Yeah.
You just keep naming them off, and then I'll tell you how bad I feel about them, and then we'll French kiss at the end.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds like a solid plan with no drawbacks. But I mean, do you feel that the Hot for Teacher and Kaputt, that one is still in that sort of not really getting it together phase, or what?
I mean, to me, that I felt pretty good about that record.
I think that was great.
Out of all the garbage that we put out, I actually don't feel that bad about it. The art is great. I was a huge fan of Van Halen at that period and that time, up to a certain point, up to Fair Warning or whatever. But I've always loved that song. I've always wanted to cover that song, and we could have done a lot more interesting things with it, but it just worked as a live take of that song, a genuine take. So it was just almost like a party song. It was stupid, but
but
that's the response we got.
Well, and any distinctions or differences between underground music and mainstream music, like I assure you, kids today do not care even a little bit. Like
right.
Even if there's ever any stigma, that's a mainstream hard rock band. Okay, who cares? Nobody like explaining why someone would be upset to that. People look at you like you're from Mars.
Yeah, right. I believe that.
So it also reminds me of the Night Vapor cover of Yankee Rose off of the first David Lee Roth record, which is great because singer for Night Vapor kind of sounds like one of those big Muppets, like the ones that have the humans in them. Kind of like so it's a great cover just because it's so different. It's like oh my god, this is like this is awesome. I love this. And I, by the way, when I say that, I mean that as a compliment.
Absolutely, I understand.
So walk me into the Fresh Breath EP. How do you feel about that one?
Fresh Breath? I feel okay about it. I kind of like that it's an actual EP. I mean, you're just never going to see those again. It's like seeing a Yeti footprint. When you go and see this smaller formatted vinyl square that it's in, and it's just a weird object. I really, really like the art on it. A friend of mine from Minneapolis, who lives in Minneapolis, Kurt Kiesel, that was a painting that he did, and it's incredible.
Yeah, the tomato and the onion that are just sort of anguished.
And, I just described that scene for him, or something very general.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's such a great artist, and a shout out to Kurt Kiesel out there in Minneapolis. But I tried getting it from him. I tried buying it from him. He never would give it or sell it to me, the actual picture, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that'd be a cool just painting to have,
Which is great because I am historically terrible with U.S. Maple memorabilia.
Really?
I lose shit gets flooded. I mean, I had a year ago, this scrapbook I meticulously put together over the course of 5 years of U.S. Maple. I had reel tape off of the reel that when we recorded with Steve, subbed in there, all this kick-ass stuff. And I stored it in this woman's barn out here in Iowa, and it got flooded.
Ugh.
And it destroyed absolutely fucking everything.
Ugh.
My heart hurts talking about it.
That's so rough, man.
And I mean, I have the memories,
Yeah.
What ones I can muster?
What ones you can retain? Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, and that's that's a good one too. And I agree with you that I think the EP is becoming a lost art for him because they're for some reason EPs are still not treated as much seriously as records, even though a full length record people will still only concentrate on 1, 2, maybe 3 songs at the max.
So what are people shopping around now? And I'm sorry about this phone. What are people shopping around now?
Like what to get signed or whatever?
Yeah, to get signed. Do they send like a whole finished set?
Man. And there's definitely people that are very into showing the process too of working. Right. I'm not. I hate that, and I don't want to hear people's works in progress. Don't send them to me. I don't care about them.
Right.
Send to me when it's done. But I think that it's weird that EPs are somehow considered less by some people. Or not that it's like a tacit overt statement or something, or an ethos, if you will. It's more just they're not given as much coverage. Like in the same way that the art of the 7-inch is kind of lost. Like 7-inches don't sell.
Oh God, no. I think it would be foolish. Are people still doing that?
Yeah, dude, I did a set of 12 splits of them in 2019. Yeah, everybody was like, "Don't
Shame
do
on
that.
you.
Don't
Shame
do
on
it.
you.
Don't do that. It's a bad idea." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm gonna do it though. I'm gonna do it." And you know what? It was a bad idea and it was a big old money
Just
pit.
in your head, he's saying that in your head. You're like, I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
I'm doing it.
I'm
I'm doing it.
It's the thing I wanted to do. I knew it was foolhardy to when I signed on for it. But 7 inches don't sell. EPs don't get the same coverage that LPs do. But people won't engage with the entire record as much anymore. I'm not talking about the and I mean this as a compliment, freaks, nerds, and weirdos that listen to this show. I'm talking about your average music fan. They still they'll concentrate on 1, 2, maybe 3 songs if you're lucky. But it has to be on a full length. So it's like, well, are we going to end up being back where we were in the 70s where there's just like filler?
Yeah, right.
You know, because it seems like it almost doesn't matter to a certain degree. And I don't know. These are larger questions. It's outside the scopes of our discussion. But I just think it's interesting because I think that EP is cool. Right. And I like EPs because you get across an idea. You get across these ideas, and it's done in a more succinct manner.
I mean, it's less length, less fewer songs, right? So you're talking 4 to 5, maybe. I don't know.
So tell me about tell me about the speaking of records, something about Thumb Days.
Okay, Thumb Days was put out by a German label out of, I believe the town was Rolsheim. The big distributor behind it was a bigger label at the time, a bigger distributor too, called Xmist Records out of Germany. They handled quite a bit outside of Germany as well.
Familiar, yeah.
And then somebody who worked for him, just a German investor, a young kid, a fan, started a label called Gasoline Boost. Okay. What was attractive to me about this is that he gave us like $8,000.
That is very attractive.
And this is when was that record done? I can't even remember.
It's got to be before 94. So let's say like somewhere around 93 or 92. Yeah.
That was a lot of money to have to spend on studios. And, he wired it to Steve Albini, and we ate so good for like almost 3 weeks to a month. I mean, it was nothing but high-end barbecue and steaks. And I mean, that money was just, it was smashed. We smashed through that money.
Right.
So I didn't really, to me, I didn't really know if the record was going to sell 2 copies.
Yeah.
I wanted this experience, and this is the next sort of camel hump in my progress, is getting a lump sum of money to do what you love to do and your art, etc. So it was a big deal, a big experience for me. Right.
Right.
I don't know. It is what it is. So wasn't that our last thing?
Yeah. Well, because that's got like Koopy and Me, and it's got like some of the more iconic Shorty songs where it allowed people that are obscurists to be like, oh yeah, but have you heard the Shorty record? It's really the okay, cool, yeah, we get it,
Right, yeah, right. Those guys are retards. They're retarded.
So. Then okay, so how does Shorty and and you guys as a band, distinguished at least in the Chicago area and regionally and whatnot, like known commodity. So then the move from Shorty into US Maple, how does that all come down? And specifically, what I want to know is you completely change your vocal style,
right?
So where's the origin of that come from?
Okay, well, I knew that band was coming to an end. We had toured fairly heavily the last 6 months. We spent 2 or 3 months opening for the Digits in Europe, and which is an incredible experience. I don't know how much you know about the Digits.
I think one of my favorite bands, and I've had Rick Sims on the show a couple times. Yeah.
Oh, because I hear them in your band.
Oh, 100%, dude! I flat out told.
That's the first thing that came to my mind was, man, this it's got that same ghost, that Digits ghost.
Yeah.
Anyway, opening
I'll cop
up.
to it.
opening up for the Digits and getting to know Rick Sims and the band was incredible for me. You know, learning showbiz from probably one of the best showbiz entertainers at the time, and maybe even since then. You know, it's
with the Digits, it was a show. It was like
absolutely, it was a rock band. I don't want to make them sound like they're some big Vegas act, but
no.
It's just the way he presented himself. You know, sort of a raucous, sort of suited up Jerry Lee with parody almost.
Yeah, with self-awareness, but like also abandoned.
Yeah. I've always been a big fan. Their record, Hey Judester, that is, I say that is their Back in Black. When I say that's your Back in Black, obviously means every song on there is doable, right?
Total banger, yeah.
And it just is. And you can't take that away from somebody, man. You put a record out like that, it has lasting impact with a lot of people.
Well, and people will discover it.
Me especially.
Yeah, people will discover it later too, and they'll be like really vibe with it. I mean, I got a cassette of that, and I pretty much wore it out. You know,
right.
We're just like, I was like, what is this? Like, I didn't have any frame of reference. I never saw a show. I was like, wow, this kicks ass.
I remember seeing them before Rick was wearing suits. It wasn't really this flashy thing. He had like boot cut denims and sort of a Janis Joplin flannel on with like a big floppy leather hat. It was this weird Southern hippie look he was doing. Yeah, he was always such a wise ass.
He got such an iconic look, you know.
He was always such a wise ass. After that show, the band that opened for them was a local heralded hardcore band called Blatant Descent. Members of Blatant Descent went on to become Tar. Okay, they were from DeKalb. They were a big, revered band. When they finished opening for the Digits, Rick Sims went up to the mic and said, "Everybody, let's thank you, Buttered Croissant." And I will never forget that because it was the biggest goof. Sure. And it was so funny and so Rick Sims, right?
Yeah, he's being a rapscallion, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Rock and roll rapscallion. So then, what comes first? Because there's a Stuck single, and
oh god, I don't even know, man.
And the record, and then there's also the AC/DC thing, the one with the joy buzzer.
Those came out. I don't even know what order anymore.
Okay.
Just treat me like I'm an old man slumped over in a wagon in the park.
Okay. All right. So
ask me those kinds of questions.
And the origin of U.S. Maple, generally speaking, did the music come first and the lyrics added later? Were you working out vocal stuff as you were going? What was the process like?
For me, and I've also explained this before, the creative process for me is very strange. At some point, if I have something to do, right, a project to do, or I need writing, right, I would put myself in this frame of mind that I felt like I was letting myself be at peace so I can let ideas come to me. At different periods during this time, it feels as if a whole lot of ideas are being dumped into my head at one time. Whole phrases, whole lyrical phrases, musical ideas, visual ideas for the record, titles, just everything that becomes the creative element. I just felt like I was being gifted this stuff from. I mean, it sounds weird and a little esoteric, but that's how it works. The creative process work for me is just in massive bursts.
Yeah, and so that's something where.
I mean, can you relate to that? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Well,
I also felt a little odd of that it hit me that way, and I don't want to come off like I'm some kind of fucking wizard or magician. It's
no. Like, because inspiration can, you could just hear like a phrase or something, and the next thing you know, you're extrapolating something out of your mind.
Yeah, right.
And there's from the craziest beginnings. Like I just watched a Playtime by Jacques Tati earlier today, and I was like, wow. there's not a lot of gags in this for a comedy, but the fact that he was like, I'm gonna build this future Paris at the time that I think is what's gonna happen, and that's gonna be my set. I'm gonna literally build these buildings and frame this up in such a way that it's had repercussions down the line. If it's like, okay, that's like everything Wes Anderson does. Barbie is inspired by Playtime, right? And it's just so crazy because at the time, I forget the Charles Gaulle, I believe, was trying to kind of erase the old Paris and make the new future Paris, which of course this would have been like of that time because nobody, nothing's ever futuristic. It's just like, no, it's going to look exactly like it made at that time. And his response to that was like, to build this like extrapolated, artificial looking world with all these tableaus that basically inspired generations of filmmakers later on. And it was literally just off of like one municipal project.
Right.
It was
I know it's nuts to think about, right?
So you're coming at things obviously from a position of being a fan of rock music and rock and roll and music. And I think there was a lot of, well, I remember it because it was a lot of discourse about, they improv. And it's like, no, this seems like really written out to me. This is articulated in a way that there's not really as much of a lexicon for. So people have to use the word deconstruction.
Right. And people who don't know improv, they're always using the word improv. They don't understand it. A lot of people say, why? Because it's disjointed. Real improv is something else, and it's a long, drawn out process.
Well, and the space that's utilized, and the fact that when you would expect things to crescendo, you expect things like it's building towards a thing, and like, oh no, there's just no release to that. Like that's something where it's like if whether it's a rock idiom or whatever, if you know what's expected to happen, and it doesn't happen. It's like, oh, that's clever. It played with my expectations. Why did I expect that to be the thing there? Why did I expect a cathartic moment?
Right.
And it was something where it was fascinating over the years to see, like, especially the early history, people would get mad. People were like, angry.
Oh, I know that.
Well, because I'm thinking back to like when you did that tour with Pavement, right?
My God. I tell you, and I've said this as well. I remember at one point getting hit in the face with all the elements of a gin and tonic in order. It was like first a cup, then the ice, and I got hit with the lime. Then somebody threw, gin. I felt Sprite coming. I mean, it was just the whole drink in order, just in the air coming at me. I used to walk out on stage with a bayonet.
Just get like a note thrown on stage that says 1 gin and tonic, please.
Azita Yusufi from the Scissor Girls and the AZ projects. Her and I were dating for a few years. She's a wonderful, beautiful woman.
Yeah, she's awesome.
But she had given me a Swiss Army's bayonet that went on the end of the rifle, and it had a really nice knife. And I used to carry that knife out on stage. I just kind of stick it in the stage, kind of stake my claim, and then
but
in front of that crowd.
They're not going to do anything. They're Pavement fans.
True, very true.
I mean, like, whatever. They'll quietly judge you. Maybe they'll throw some stuff. That's the worst it's going to get. They're just going to be sitting there with their baseball hats on, like, judging.
I can tell you with 100% honesty that audience felt beaten by the end of the night.
Well, that's something where it's like, it's bold because, from a perspective of a band picking the acts that they're going to be playing with, and you're like, hey, we like this thing, and it doesn't matter why we like it, we want you to see it. It's great because it's almost like an avant art project to let's have this contextless. And then here we go.
at the end of that tour, Matador Records put together, I swear to God, it was about 2 inches thick of complaints that people had put on the internet. It was like a Detroit phone book, right? And, I remember the comments, these guys are all junkies. That singers are retard. What are they deaf? I mean, it was just one after. There are hundreds and hundreds of these things. I wish I had that still. Memorabilia.
Oh my God! Yeah, you could put it out as a zine or something. Yeah,
lost memorabilia.
That's amazing.
I'm gonna write a book called Lost Memorabilia Blues.
You just have like the book could be just remembrances of like the best items, right? Well, but that's so funny because it's like people were so moved to reaction that they wrote to like a label to complain. Which what's the end to that? Like what were they hoping to gain? Just be heard?
I know. There was
asking for their money back. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what Matador was going to do about it.
I have to give it to Pavement for letting us do that, and especially Steve Malcolmus. There's a million bands that were standing there with their hands open, wanting to do what we did, and he handpicked us, and maybe that was his relationship with David from the Silver Jews.
Berman, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Sure. David and I go way back. He is the person that discovered U.S. Maple and had Dan Koretsky sit down and Dan Osborne sit down and listen to us.
Nice.
So he is also the only one that insisted on claiming the $100 prize for doing that. Dan put out this sort of fake jokey offer that if you bring a band that we signed, we'll give you $100 cash. And David was the only one that demanded he get that $100.
You get the money. Hey man, get the money. So, right. So I was witness to because it was one of the I don't remember first time you came to the West Coast. I don't remember when it was exactly, but I remember just being like is a very clear line drawn between people that knew what it was that you guys did and people that were just kind of there. And
right.
I don't think I've ever seen people just be that confused. Like people weren't angry necessarily. People were just like, "What is?"
Right.
Is it supposed to? Is this? Like just like really thoughtful, right?
Yeah, right.
Because it was San Francisco. It's not like you're in like some middle of nowhere podunk town where they have no lexicon.
I tell you, stepping out on the Fillmore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
many people can say that.
Yeah, pretty rad.
So that's one of the little things that I sort of keep in my pocket,
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Pull it out once a year, sometime maybe before or after Christmas, and just hug that little memory.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a legendary venue. Of course you would.
Yeah.
But let's go back to like early on. I know that Letter to ZZ Top's like one of the earlier songs, right? Like as far as like, was that so like, where do you know you've got this great group together? Where do you know that like, okay, we're doing something cool, but this is kind of different? Like, is it just out from the gate or does it require a couple songs to get put through the grinder
That's a very
first?
good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I knew that the elements in the band and where people were coming from musically were all really unique and they were all very competent. I felt the chances were pretty good that we were going to be able to turn out something cool. Right. So that's how I felt going in, right? And when that happens, that puts me in a better mood. I start to write more. I start to get excited. When you're a young band. So, it was a very good, it was almost an instant creative aha for me that we had something. And that was shortly into the band, a couple months, I think.
Yeah. And as mentioned,
the songs the sound in the songs did not sound like anything that was happening. Right.
Right. And
so once I understood that, I felt like, well, we're headed in the right direction.
I think after the fact and after you establish yourself a little more, people suddenly were pulling out the Captain Beefheart card, which is like, okay.
Yeah. I had never listened to Captain Beefheart. I never owned an album.
Yeah.
And, of course, I'd heard of him. But if you had played him on the radio, I wouldn't know.
Wait, what's that? Yeah.
I didn't know anything about him. And I started seeing his name in our reviews. Who is this Captain Beefheart, And I remember the first song that I got turned on to is probably my favorite song he has, which is called "Ice Cream for Crow."
Yeah, it's a great one.
I don't even know what album it's on. I don't. But
I'd have to look.
that is a great song. that sort of encapsulates the Beefheartian sound or whatever.
Yeah,
and I dig it, and it's very cool. I mean, they don't sound like U.S. Maple. They sound way better than U.S. Maple. I mean, that's an incredible band. I don't see us on some kind of level like that. Hell no.
but I think there's also an antecedent that, like, ultimately what Don Von Villette was doing was like his version of the blues, right? Like he's just doing like he's, and just as everyone's like, oh, Tom Waits is just doing Beefheart. It's like, no, they're both coming from Howling Wolf, man. Like, it's just that everybody's going to take a different thing from that. And I always thought it was interesting that a lot of times it seems like with your vocal stuff, it's like, oh, you're just like, it's what you're taking out almost rather than like what you're adding. Like rather than being, and not that I need to say this, I like Led Zeppelin just fine, but sometimes it's like, wow, I wish Robert Plant would just dial it back a little bit with the not singing all the time, constantly, always, right?
You know what? It's weird you say that, because I was thinking that exact same thing about 3-4 nights ago. I was watching some YouTube videos, and it's like, does he always have to be saying yeah or baby?
He's always doing something
in every single gap in that song.
Yeah. and it gets tiring. Like the first time you hear it, like, oh right, yeah, rock and roll, and then you're like, wow, he really never does shut up, does he? And I call that lead singer syndrome, which is that you get nervous, so you want to fill the space with as many interjections as possible.
Yeah, it could very well be that. That makes sense.
So when somebody doesn't do that, it's always like, that's interesting. They're like leaving space. They're leaving like room for these things to breathe and do stuff. But then it's not even that, especially in the early US Maple stuff, you were leaving space. It's like you were almost surgically taking things out. And the stuff that you were leaving in was like, led to this affectation, if affectation it was, that is utterly unique. That I've now heard emulated, by the way, where it's like, oh, they're doing a US Maple thing. And it never sounds, just like, Beefheart doesn't sound like Howlin' Wolf exactly, and everybody kind of puts their own spin on it. That's good. But what did that? Because it seems like, because I talked to you a long time ago. I talked to Todd. I should have him on the show again. Yeah. And I know he was like surprised when you came in with the vocals that you came in. He was like, oh, that's what it is. Oh, okay. Like. And he didn't expect it, and like wasn't quite sure about it at first. And it's so funny.
When we practiced, just the sound was so terrible. You could never hear the vocals. I mean, they probably never heard a single word.
Yeah.
And I was just hoping that they would maybe get the gist of how the vocals went. Like, if there was a part of a melody here, or I sounded like this here. I just hope that I sort of give them a peppering of a map to follow, but they didn't even get that. They knew absolutely nothing. They had in their minds, they had never heard me before. So this is like a new guy just walking in off the street into a studio for a record that's been meticulously put together, and he's just belching and yelling and scratching. So I feel for them, and I struggle over my vocals in the studio. I'm a notorious bitch about vocals, and I do one pass at a time, and I want to hear that pass 3-4 times before I'm satisfied with the way it sounds. And I will piecemeal the entire album together. I mean, this has to be a nightmare for the rest of those guys.
Right.
But most of them lasted and sat there. That's cool. It's cool to have that in a band.
So how did that work with Jim O'Rourke? Was O'Rourke down for that?
Jim was down for anything, because Jim, to my knowledge, had never done a recording project on that level.
Yeah, that was pretty early on for him.
He had a studio in his house. It was like next to the bookcases. It wasn't this big deal. But Jim knew how to record, and Jim had been recording and putting stuff out for years and years. And I got to know him. I got to like him. He was hilarious. talented, funny. So of course I would have let him do anything, and producing the record, that was fantastic. So he just seemed to be the likely candidate. Steve was recording lots and lots of bands at the time, and I just felt I wanted to go in a completely different direction potentially with the engineering of it,
Well, especially coming from Shorty too, which is a very
Exactly. So I mean, I was intent on changing that aggression, right?
right.
And changing it into something else. So, yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, it absolutely does, and also, there are things that seem quaint by comparison, but it's worth mentioning. No bass guitar, right? Which was huge
Yeah,
at the
right.
time. It was like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean? Like,
right.
and that alone is gonna be a unique characteristic, especially with
Right.
the way Shippy plays versus the way Rittman's playing, and
Yeah.
there's all these elements that are just new elements that even if you're familiar with the players, it's like, no, this is deployed completely differently. And I'm thinking back to Pat's drumming, like on Sin City, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is AC/DC. They're like known for like this thing. It's like, yeah, let's not do that thing even remotely, like even a little bit.
Right,
Like, let's
right.
do something completely different. Which, as opposed to covers that are more worshipful or just kind of
Sure.
like,
More derivative.
yeah,
Or whatever. Yeah.
just like a safer, I guess would be the correct term.
Yeah.
No, it's like this
Yeah.
is like this actually is a deconstruction to a certain degree, but you're taking what's the fundamental nature of being a song. Perfect example, I'm related back to me, is that we did that split LP with Lung. We covered one of their songs and they covered one of ours. We basically covered one of their songs straight up like it would be a Secret Friend song, but it's a loud rock band doing it versus Lung doing it, so it's inherently going to be different.
Right. That sounds great. That sounds like a great thing. You and
so fun.
Lung doing this.
It was
Yeah.
great. And then we do a duet too, Kate and I. It's great, but we're not talking about that. But they did a cover of one of ours. This is a song that's known for a very specific heavy riff. It's like a riff delivery system, and they don't do the riff at all, except for a second and a half at the end.
Wow.
which is like, I love that kind of thing, because then
Yeah, for sure.
that leads me to think of when bands would be more playful about doing that kind of stuff. And especially when it's coming from a place of love and respect for the music, that it's like you respect it too much to do too straightforward a cover of it. You know what I mean?
And not a lot of people know this. In fact, very few know this. On our record, Sang Phat Editor, I think it is at the end of the song Mountaintop. I'm pretty sure that's the song. In that song, when we were doing that, I had the idea to hand a song off, our song, to another band and let them play their version of us in their minds, whatever that would be. So in that song, at the end of that song, the faders fade out U.S. Maple and they ease in Flying Lutenbachers. And the Flying Lutenbachers actually finished that song. That's the Flying Lutenbachers.
I did not know that. Wow, that's funny.
Yeah.
And I know Weasel too. So
That's a real Easter egg there.
That's crazy. So as you said, that was on Sang Phat Editor. Which song
It's
was
on
that?
It's on Sang Phat Editor, which is a colorful camouflage.
You can't miss it from a distance. That's for sure.
Yeah, right. So it's on that record. I believe it is at the end of the song called Mountaintop. And if you know Flying Ludenbachers before, you can tell now having this information in your head, you'll hear it's them. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I love that. That's a total. I've listened to that record plenty. I didn't know that. Great.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to get to as well. But getting back to long hair, I feel like initial reaction to that. Was there? It's a rock band that doesn't rock in a traditional way. Right, there's a disjointedness to it, but it's purposeful. It's not accidental. There's everything about it it's still hooky. It's just hooky in a way that's playing with your expectations. And what's the Devo compilation? Pioneers Who Got Scalped, right? I always think about that title. And clearly there were advocates for the band, early on, but it's not a straightforward band,
Right.
In the way that people would expect. So you get some critical acclaim, and then you go out for like a European tour or something, right? Like almost immediately afterwards. So how does that go?
It went pretty fantastic. We did a lot of shows with Melt Banana.
Great. Yeah.
And you don't always want to play after that band, by the way.
Yeah.
They're just like a dervish, and but the thing about US Maple is we play so wildly different than them.
Right.
With emphasis placed completely elsewhere that they might tap into normally. That it was two very different entities, and so we really did just as well as they did.
Yeah.
People, we had a lot of fans. People loved us. It wasn't like, oh, that band got blown away by the headliner.
Yeah. This is a different thing. Yeah.
And that dynamic is possible at any point, and probably still happens these days. You get a headliner and somebody shows you that they got chops and they know what they're doing, and you learn a lesson from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then like sometimes you're like, all right, we gotta rethink the set.
Exactly. Right.
Pace us a little differently.
Let's cut the encore. They don't want to hear this.
Well, and that's and that's something where that's being a band that's comfortable with yourself too, when you can recognize that and you recognize, well, we don't do the same thing as this band. We do something that is different, and it's going to hit differently because of that. But there is also
that's the strength. That is the strength that we carried around with us and sustained us. Really, is just knowing what you just said.
Yeah,
nobody understands more than I that why you would not like US Maple, or the singer's not singing, you can't hear him. What that idiot. I mean, I agree with a lot of it. I mean, I at least agree with the. I'm at least open to the idea that happens, right? Come on. I'm not in a cave, Jesus.
It's not going to be well, and there's also the thing that if it's trying to be for everybody, then it's usually for nobody.
Yeah, true. True.
So that's the narrow casting aspect of it, and that's something I think that culturally is a lot easier now because everyone's safely ensconced in their own little circles anyway. But I think it's easier to understand now, whereas a time period when we had a more of a monoculture was like, what are they doing? What is this?
Yeah.
Like, and we're talking about a time, but we're also talking about like a time period that Shudder to Think had a hit. Where it's
right,
like, wow,
exactly.
Have you heard that band? They're weird as hell.
Right.
Like that's
right.
I mean, it's catchy to me, but if you go, as I'm fond of saying on this show, if you cater to my sensibilities, you'll almost never build a music career. So, so you've got. What's the cover? I always thought was so interesting. Like, what is the cover for Long Hair in Three Stages? Which I'm dwelling on this a little bit just because there is a new reissue of it. It's beautiful. I got to pick one up myself actually. But
is it the Wanderer?
Yeah.
By Dion.
Yeah.
The Belmonts.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's the which is the most soundtracky, I guess, Dion cover I've ever heard.
I love that song. It's one of those songs where I've always wanted to cover it in any shape, form, in any band I was in. It's always been one of those songs that I wanted to redo. And honestly, I'm not very happy with it. I'm not very happy with my job.
Well, you almost, if you're just listening to it blind, you wouldn't even know it's a cover until
I know. There's certain critical things that are wrong with it. And the first, in my mind, being you can't really hear the original in there anywhere. I mean, what's the point of doing a cover if you can't trace it back to the originator, right?
Yeah.
It's nice to hear little elements of the original or something that keeps you alive in what you're directly listening to. It's not your song, it's their song,
right?
But and we don't do that. I mean, it's just oddball spacey shit going on, and I wasn't happy with it.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever told anybody that.
Well,
Al
you and
Johnson,
me and
Show of the
10,000
Bummers.
friends. It's a, it's a real intimate
Show of
experience.
Bummers.
Okay, so, but I think as a mission statement, Long Hair in 3 Stages, it kind of gets across what you're doing, like, out of the gate, like, pretty clearly.
Yeah.
I think this reissue is, well, I mean, I can't believe it's been 25 years, frankly, but, whatever. That's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if it sort of urges newer listeners to sort of check it out and get like, huh? What? With a whole new generation,
That's what you hope, that's what you hope for. I mean, I'm glad that we're still relevant to somebody somewhere today in 2025. That means a lot to me.
Well, I feel like, because not to skip way ahead, but Purple on Time's like 2003, right? I feel like there was a couple years after that there was another kind of like it became, not that there were bands that are U.S. Maple ripoffs or anything, but I feel like it would have become a little easier for people to parse what it is the band was about, as you kind of were making more straightforward stuff compared to the earlier stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So it would be like a softer landing.
Exactly. Exactly. I know where you're headed, and I'm already there. And here's the 5th bummer of the show. That album, Purple on Time. I'm a fan of some of the slower songs on there. The lyrics are very good in those songs, but there's a number of songs. There's a number of songs on there that I'm not very happy with. I guess I'm mixed on that. I'm mixed on that record. For me, my favorite record, a record I can talk about forever and forever and enjoy talking about, is Talker.
Talker's great. I mean,
that's it's just my favorite record. Recorded in New York with Michael Gira.
At BC.
At BC Studios,
which I've been to, which is great. I was like, can I go see the big drum?
Oh my God! And you know how the basement there is like an armory, right?
Oh,
it's just a big it looks like the basement for a castle.
Oh, absolutely! It looks like a horror movie could take place.
They have the drums. They have this to see our drummer down there playing in that room. I mean, it gives you chills. It was a special place.
BC's the coolest guy too. He's been on this show, and it's one of the,
for sure.
Like what a great dude. Like it's a great spot.
And he's like, he can be a cocksucker. I tell you that much.
Oh, okay. All
right. That's what I love about him, though. Michael Gira is real. He's 100% real.
Yeah. Well, that's very true. So, all right. So let's talk about Talker, but I want to talk about Sang Phat Editor, aka one of the most garish looking album covers, certainly of the '90s, which is like. Now, my impression of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like, it's like camouflage, but the least camouflage possible. Am I remotely on base with that?
So the concept behind that record is
something Vietnamish, right?
It was to glamorize a horrible event in our nation's history, which is the Vietnam War. So we kind of did we did some promo things where we were in the window of Reckless Records dressed up as Vietnam vets, like marching up and down, like a living, breathing set almost. We were playing cards, drinking beer. Every now and then, Mark Shippey would go out on the sidewalk in the front. This is on Saturday, downtown Chicago. He'd go out in fatigues with this big phone calling in airstrikes. It was like absurd, weird little theater happening.
Sure, it's like, And
I know for a fact, this is when I know we had gone too far. One of the guys, and I think it was Mark Shippey, had put a little piece of notebook paper on the window facing out of the record store, and it just said Charlie, and it had slash marks like we had killed a half a dozen Charlie, right? Mm-hmm. You can't do that today.
You could barely do it then, frankly. I mean,
sometimes I'm glad I'm sold.
Well, and that's something where
I can't be held responsible anymore.
But it is almost like and then Vietnam exists a lot in pop culture, and I think a lot of it has to do with it being the one, the first war that America objectively did not win, and that's always going to be something that it's like the jock who can't get over that one game, and he's sitting there, at his car's dealership that his dad owns, thinking about it. So.
I'm very interested in Vietnam stuff. I read a lot of books on it, and so that was part of it too. Is I just wanted to do it because I liked it. I like the aesthetic and the horror of it and all of those things. So, but yeah, I mean, the idea was to glamorize a horrible event.
Well, and
with gaudy colors and whatever.
Right, like almost like a. Oh, it's just like those '80s. Like I feel like there was a lot of those '80s shirts and things like that. They're just like, oh look, we can make this really bright and fluorescent. I'm like, yes,
right.
But nobody asked if you should do that. That you only were concentrated if you could do that.
And on the inside of that record is an actual postcard that you can mail. There's a place for a stamp, and I already wrote the letter for you. It's like some scribblings, back home from the front. But it had the spaces for you to put down a forwarding address. I mean, it was an actual usable postcard. That would have been great to get that in the mail.
Yeah, well, and it's so funny too that when you think about people that went, well, anybody that goes to war, but especially that war, like we tell those stories. A lot of people that are transformed by the process. So
absolutely,
to have something musically sort of transformative and to have like the visuals sort of matching that sort of recontextualize something, again, without being overt about it, but like, hey, this is what this is. Like I think it gets across those ideas,
loosely,
in a way that's there for people that are looking to pick it up. Right. And it's not that the music's still like, challenging or whatever, depending on what your tastes are. But it makes sense. I didn't know about the theater of the absurd going on in the regular records. But again, I'm looking at this coming from like a different coast. So
I've got pictures of that.
That's kind of awesome, actually. I mean, as a flex, that's definitely awesome. Like I'm
gonna send you a picture, an original picture of that.
I would love that. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Great.
Yeah. You send me your address, and I'll send you a picture.
I absolutely will do that. That sounds fantastic. I'll hang it up in a place of honor, which is with the rest of my rock and roll bric-a-brac. but it's all cool stuff.
We call it a closet.
All right, so Sang Phat Editor. So let's talk about Talker. This is the one that you like the best. This is the one that you think is the most successful as a record, or you like the best.
In my mind, the potential of You as a Maple was fully realized on that record.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt about it then. That's how I feel about it now. I don't know what to say. I mean, a lot of things play into that, but I think the songs are absolutely stunning. I think they're beautiful. I think they're different. Emotional shit. And, the vocals sound not as horrible as they usually do. There's some intimacy there, right? And you can actually hear that on the mic, and all this stuff that I've been trying for years to do, but it doesn't come across for whatever reason. Finally, a little bit of that starts to actualize on this record. So I felt good about that.
This is the first one for Drag City, too.
Yeah, right.
So how did that all come to pass?
That was, I felt bad for Mark Fisher because Mark is one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And he was the first guy to take a chance on us. And Mark always worked 1,000% more than he probably had had thought that he was going to do. I mean, he was running this whole operation on his own, funding it through his father's sheet metal business. I mean, his dad was loaning him money. I mean, this was a struggling hardship, this label.
Yeah, and a labor of love, clearly, with all the,
So I connected with him and how he was doing things, and I commend him for that. And the reason why I went with Drag City is because U.S. Maple was touring more and more. And I wanted to make sure that we had things in place like a publicist, people at the label, many different departments, everybody answering the phones, people writing one sheets. Mark Fisher had some of those, but the difference is that Drag City had a staff, and Mark, it was just Mark. It's always been just Mark. So, in essence, Mark deserves 100% of the accolades about that label because it's always just been him.
Yeah.
So, and he's a real sweetheart of a human being. But it was just a tactical move because I felt like we're working so hard. I want to guarantee that we're going to get results. Drag City could hire a publicist.
More resources. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were, what was it, Nasty Little Man we had at the time when you could afford Nasty Little Man, right? When they were the publicists for Beastie Boys,
That's right, yeah.
And it's not like U.S. Maple was going to matter a shit to them, but at least you had somebody rudimentarily making the phone calls during the day and maybe trying to get us a splurge here and there,
Well, and it's the idea also, ideally, is that it opens some doors. Too,
yeah,
right?
for sure. It's more opportunity. A lot of things were in place. The label had been around for a long time, and I got to know both Dan Koretsky and Dan Osborne, who run the label, and Ryan Murphy, who was the publicist there. Very smart, very capable, very bright, interesting people with great musical tastes. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. There's wonderful people with a wonderful sense about things. One of my favorite bands of all time is Smog.
Sure, yeah, Smog's great.
Just Bill Callahan alone he's a stunning songwriter to me. And albums like Knock Knock to me is his Back in Black. There's a couple of his albums I could say that because every goddamn song is fucking fantastic.
Yes, he's a
poor Bill Callahan, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh no, there's too many great songs.
I'm a wizard.
Yeah, too many timeless songs. Boo.
But it's just it was just a no-brainer move. It had nothing. There was no bad feelings.
Yeah,
and of course, Mark's re-releasing the record, and it's all good.
Yeah, which that package looks amazing. I got to pick up a copy.
Mark's great. He's an artist. I mean, artists do shit like that sometimes. They do good shit sometimes.
Well, and that is something that's interesting about these times that we're in now is that it's not that there's like a fetishism for it necessarily, but there's a deep appreciation towards tactile product that is something that exists more than just like a thumbnail on your computer or phone that you just push on, right?
Right.
Which isn't to say that everything is that way, but it definitely is that way for when people engage deeper on into the art.
Yeah,
and that's something that I think. Well, no, nobody's gonna freaking argue that. I think, but there's a whole vinyl industrial complex for reissues. But I'm talking about
for sure, man.
For like bands like yourself that where it's like, oh no, this is the true heads will know kind of band, right?
Right. And when you put that stuff out on 180 grams of vinyl, you're getting something special.
Absolutely. No, and like people are they're gonna hear it differently just because they're hearing it differently, literally hearing it differently. But it's also something where you can develop a deeper appreciation because of the effort sometimes to acquire it, to put it on. You have to stop whatever it is you're doing to put it on, which these days is sort of like people are starting to take a more deep appreciation for. Music listening is not something that happens in the background, and
I can't. Is this a record that we mastered at Abbey Road? Do you know?
The new. You're talking about the reissue.
I'm talking about I'm talking about Talker.
Talker. I don't know. I mean,
I think maybe it was. We mastered at least one record out there, and that's all. That's not a bummer. Being at Abbey Road. And,
yeah.
out at all
The
those
first
studios
offering to
and
the
stuff.
Oracle of Drag City, produced by Michael Draw of the Swans. This is their unique take on Rock and Roll High School. Nice. That's on the
I
band
think
camp.
we did. Yeah, like I said, I'm just an confused old man who likes pecan pie. So
I'm more of a
Easy
key lime guy, but
questions
pecan's
only.
good. Yeah.
easy questions only.
Let's see the nerds on Discogs have that. I'll check it out. That's usually a pretty good bet.
So are we doing this? I'm sorry to be such a buffoon, but is this happening live right now?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is. Cool.
Well,
Very cool.
And it's for people that subscribe to the show and patrons of the show, and then it goes out to the patrons as a podcast, and then a few more days later, then it goes out to the general population, which is how most people engage with it, whether it's on YouTube or as a podcast. So it's I took something that was easy and something that was simple and made it very difficult.
Right. Well, you know what? I mean, you do a very good job on it. You make people feel relaxed and warm, and you're coming from the same ilk, so you're easy to talk to. So
Good. Well, thank you.
You should know that.
I appreciate the halftime report for the show. It's good to know. I mean, look, I the only time I allow that kind of navel gazing really is when I did the 10-year show. But it is something that I think that this show has a unique perspective, and one of the unique perspectives is that it isn't something that is a foreign concept. It's something that is a huge part of my life. So I'm coming at it from that lived experience, and it's always humbling to have so many people wanting to share their experiences.
Quit bragging.
Yeah, enough about you. How about me?
It shows about me. You see?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about. That's why people are tuning in. That's the moneymaker right there.
Right.
Acre Thrills.
Yeah.
So slight lineup change, right?
We lost Pat Sampson. I think he wanted to be more of a homebody at the time, and U.S. Maple was touring quite a bit.
You're hitting hard. That's right.
Yeah, and so I understand. I mean, of course, it's very scary when I try and think about who might be able to replace Pat. That's not possible.
Yeah, very unique player. Yeah.
I mean, there were so many musicians in Chicago at the time, and I was just scratching my head. I mean, Todd Rittman had found Adam Vita, who was the brother of Ben Vita. Ben Vita was in several bands in Chicago. The names escape me now, but Adam was his brother. Adam was in jazz circles playing around doing stuff like this. And I remember he came in and he looked like a young, skinny John Travolta, high school kid, naive almost. And he played the first 5 or 6 songs by memory. He learned, that's not easy. I mean, you're going to, as a drummer, to come in and pick all this U.S. Maple percussion stuff up. I mean,
yeah, it's not Back in Black. Yeah.
Yeah. I was floored. And the only words I said to him after that first rehearsal was, "You want to join a rock and roll band?"
Nice. Yeah, and that's something where bands are alchemy, and it's like if you change any slight amount of mixtures of any of the elements, then you run the risk of getting something else entirely.
I mean, we enjoyed the best case scenarios out of quite a lot of things, even our losses. Right?
Yeah.
We lose Pat. Adam was his own drummer. Adam wasn't just to sit in for Pat. Adam could expand on Pat's stuff even, and it was a bit looser, and maybe even a spare form of drumming, but it worked. I was always happy with Adam. Always happy with his drumming and his ideas.
Well, I remember when you saw on that tour, you played with Black Ghost with Jared's band in San Francisco, Bottom of the Hill, the great Bottom of the Hill, still around, by the way. I've always loved that Bottom of the Hill. Everything else has changed. Bottom of the Hill remains.
Wow. Yep.
It's like one of those places, right?
Right.
And I remember just being like, wow, what's this going to be like with a different drummer? This is going to be, it's like so crazy. Like, I don't like, is it going to be the same? Is it going to be totally different? And it was like, oh no, this is great. You know, this is doing all the things that, that you would want it to do.
Right. You know, best case scenario, you know, so I think US Maple, you know, as well as being talented and being in the right place at the right time, you know, we had a lot of luck. You know, we had a lot of luck, and that's got to play into your favor if you're gonna be successful. I think luck has something to do with it.
Yeah, and there's
opportunity. I don't know how you want to say it, but synchronicity. You know, just events.
You gotta be instead of getting ready, you need to be ready as well. But
right.
That's, I think people, you know, harder I work, luckier I get. That's a Buzz Osborne quote. I stole it for one of my songs because I was like, that's a good line. But there is, I mean, chance is real, as is chaos theory. You know, sometimes it's just like stuff comes through, and you know, the windows appear for deeply inscrutable reasons that nobody could ever understand or replicate or game out, and that's just the way it is. And sometimes, you know, creativity, art can be there. Everything about it can be dead on, and it just doesn't matter.
Yep.
And there's not anything you can do about it, and that's and you have to kind of be okay with the mysteries of the cosmos allowing for that, and not letting it ruin the fact that you're doing good work. Ultimately. Right. Thank you for my TED Talk, by the way.
Okay.
But but I think that you know, that's I think the Acre Thrills record is great. There's that cool. It's like a mini documentary about it. It's been years since I've seen it, but I thought, I was like, oh wow.
I think it's called "What Is a Pachyderm."
I was gonna say it had some ostentatious title. I remember.
Yeah. Because we had recorded at Pachyderm Studios in Minnesota. Right. Nirvana had recorded there. A lot of bigger bands recorded there. It's an octagon-shaped live room with window-to-floor windows out in the middle of a forest.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of feel like you're in that band Talk out there playing. You know,
sure.
Very nature infused. You know, a trout stream ran through this property, and they had an indoor in-ground pool, and it was incredible.
Yeah, it's a great spot.
I was glad that was documented by somebody, because you wouldn't believe it if I told you anyway. I mean, it was palatial.
Right. Sure. Yeah, and you know, that's something where you get to be adjacent to things that culturally have greater cachet, just like High Fidelity.
Yeah, right.
How was that, by the way?
High Fidelity was it was a great opportunity for me. I had been studying acting in Chicago for years before that, maybe 2 or 3 years. I was going to a small theater organization in town called Center Theater, taking classes and workshops and stuff like that. And it just so happens that a friend of Drag City, D.V. DeVincentis is his name. He is a screenplay writer in Hollywood. He's done a lot of bigger things, like Charlie's Angels and, you know, whatever. He's done some big scripts, right? Mm-hmm. So he's from Chicago, part of the sort of Cusack crew of people and the success stories. So he was already ingrained in Hollywood, and he got on this project. D.V. was very good friends with Dan Koretsky, who runs Drag City. Very good friends.
Cool.
So he had a plethora to pick from the indie world, just being affiliated with Drag City. You know,
pick of the litter. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what they did to make that movie is they bought the entire stock of a couple of record stores and then just built a fake used record store in Chicago on Milwaukee Avenue. They built that on like not a sound stage, but out of an actual leased room, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, and that's, you know, there's a notable cachet with the source material for that too.
Yeah,
you
right,
know?
right.
But I think that as a movie, that definitely struck a chord for people at that time. That anyway, you don't necessarily need to be in like this kind of music or whatever to relate
Listen
to.
to this. I remember eating a bowl of cereal in my dirty robe in Chicago in my underpants, sitting down watching like Entertainment Weekly or something in the morning.
Sure,
And
yeah.
they did a promo for that movie.
Yeah.
And of all the scenes in that movie, they picked my scene to show. And this is huge for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This is another one of those camel humps in the rise and fall of Al Johnson's life. This is the rise, right? Incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I remember
farcical is what it is.
I remember thinking that you were going to be in it more when I finally saw it. I was like, oh, I thought he was going to be like,
Hey, I would have loved to. I mean, there are people that flew out there, actors, from LA, working actors that flew out there, whose parts weren't even a half of what I did.
Yeah.
They had a couple of nods and a couple of words, but my part, for whatever reason, has become a little bit of, it's a bit iconic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if it's because of Maple's relationship with Captain Beefheart or that type of music or what, or I'm not exactly sure, but for whatever reason, it hit well with a lot of people. So I'm happy with that,
Yeah, and that's a cool little moment.
I remember I kept bumping into Jack Black in the scene, and he kept turning around and angrily telling me, "Don't step on my lines." And he told me that 2 or 3 times. It's like, dude, I heard you, man.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about acting. I'm not going to start talking when you're talking.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
You fat nerd.
Jack.
Get away from me, you fat nerd.
Exactly. How dare you, Jack Black? First of all, how dare you? Secondly, sure.
Jesus. He should be kissing the Pope's ring. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. No, but it's funny because it's like that is to have those musical references. Oh, well, yeah, Ian's in it too, right? Like, and he's asking about the Beta Band. Right?
Yeah, right. Great scene of him as the part of confused Curioso indie book collector.
Right. Great. Awesome. Awesome stuff.
He's great. I love him.
I bought a 4x12 off of him in New York, which is like bringing sand to the beach. Like buy a 4x12 on tour, but I was like, first of all, it's a good price. Secondly, it was like, that's a really good cab. It looks like hell, but that's a really good cab. Like even if it wasn't like the Don cab, I was like, this is a good deal.
Right. I mean, yeah, I was a fan of Don Cab. I'm a much bigger fan of Ian Williams.
Yeah, as a dude.
I think that anything that he's in has the potential to be very interesting and very cool. He's a talented guy with interests that lie in a lot of different areas. He's not just stuck to the guitar. He knows he knows what's going on, in a lot of different ways that I don't know what's going on. So, he's a good guy. I always hope he does well because I know he puts the work in.
Yeah, he's a deeply thoughtful, creative individual. And by the way, every once in a while, I regret having this show be live because people feel they need to correct me on this. I do know that Pat played on Acre Thrills and that Adam was on the last album. I know that.
Okay.
Somebody in the comments felt the need to put it up because apparently I was making it seem like that Adam was on Acre Thrills. He's not. It's Pat that's on there. I'm talking about after the record came out and the tour that followed.
Exactly, because I remember sitting down with Pat when he was telling me that he wanted to leave the band after the record came out, something like that. So yeah, I do remember that that's true. So thank you, listeners.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what's
correct the
going on.
record.
I can't remember a damn thing.
Exactly. If I glossed over that, deep apologies.
Oh
because
my God.
I wanted to get to other stuff. So Acre Thrills, there's that documentary on it. It's cool. Like I haven't seen it in years. I would imagine it's probably up on YouTube, right?
Yeah, it's up there. If you just Google U.S. Maple, you got a bunch of crap.
Yeah. You just Google U.S. Maple, you get a bunch of crap. There you
If
go.
you have that thirst for crap,
What
please
an-
Google U.S. Maple.
What an endorsement. Well, so talk to me about Purple on Time. So that's the last album, and there's thoughts you have about that. It's definitely, I feel like, the most classic rock out of all of them. You guys were touring like beasts.
In my mind too. I mean, anytime I fool myself into thinking that this song or that song sounds too mainstream, or we're starting to slow down a little bit on the squirreliness.
Mm-hmm.
We always end up putting a couple of songs out there that still surprise me, and those are some of the slower songs on there. A song called "Whoopee Invader."
Mm-hmm.
I love that song. I love that song so much for a lot of different reasons. I'm not a big fan of the song "Dumb in the Wings," which kicks off the record, I believe. It's a little too derivative to me, but that's what you get. I mean, that's what sometimes they're not all golden nuggets.
They can't all be winners.
Yeah. Right.
Well, it's not the first song, but it was the single. It's the preview track, right?
Yeah.
In fact, it might be. I don't know. I've actually never done that on vinyl. It could be the kickoff of the second side, maybe.
Maybe.
But who can tell? It's the fog
Right.
of war.
Yeah.
So as a band, since I want to talk about some of the live shows and the triumphs and the horror, right? Which is something that any band will definitely be aware of. But I think that there's a lot to say about, like we mentioned, like being in adverse situations and provoking a reaction, like getting a reaction out of a crowd, even if that's not necessarily, you're not doing a Gigi Allen thing or something.
Yeah.
But getting a reaction that is a strong reaction. But are there any shows that really stick out in your mind throughout the career of U.S. Maple as notable for one way or another?
Two. The first time I realized that the band had a lot of potential live to be an act that you could expect maybe characterization happening or facial expressions or just something visceral. We had played with Tortoise. We opened for Tortoise. We got this great gig opening for Tortoise, the Mighty Tortoise. And they were a huge band in Chicago, but we opened for them in Muncie, Indiana.
Months ago. I played it twice, actually. But yeah.
You've been there twice. My God.
Somehow came back. I don't know why.
Yeah. In any case, we had finished the set to, a similarly sort of stunned look of faces. And I remember, though, that during the last song, Todd had shuffled himself over to where the back line of Tortoise's stuff was off to the side. That would then come on the stage. It was just their instruments were lined up against the wall. And Todd started playing their bass drum, the Tortoise bass drum, with his foot. Just tapping out a rhythm like this.
Yeah.
And it was fitting into one of our songs. And I just thought that was such a brilliant move. And I know that wasn't something he pre-planned. It was just spontaneity.
Just in the moment. Yeah.
It was in the moment. And I just thought, man, that's fucking great, man. I love stuff like that. I love surprise and spontaneity. And the second show that had a big effect on me that sort of set us apart from everybody else is we played a college festival at Case Western Reserve University. Cleveland, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Is it in Cleveland?
I don't even know. That's good.
Okay.
I can look it up.
It might be on the East Coast. I may have it completely wrong, but it is a science school. It's a smarty pants.
Case
school.
Western is private university in Cleveland, Ohio. Yep.
Okay, yeah, Cleveland, very smart school. A lot of technology and sciences, etc. We played a big festival there, and I remember during our performance, it was a lot of college kids laying on blankets in the lawn, that kind of scene. It was outside.
Mm-hmm.
hackies being sacked everywhere.
Hackey's gonna sack. Yep.
And frisbees and dogs running around. Well, at some point, 2 or 3 of the dogs had found themselves climbing up on stage with us. And I remember looking over, and there were 2 or 3 dogs with their front paws on the PA wedges. They were facing the audience like we were facing the audience. It appeared that we had been maybe one group, perhaps.
Fantastic.
And in my mind, I was just like, this does not happen to other bands. This
Right. Exactly.
This happens to U.S. Maple.
It's like human audiences hit or miss, but amongst canines, boy, they're really on it. That's amazing. That's. I know that there's a. I heard tell of this Oklahoma City show. Is that a thing? Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah. So, long story short, we had been drinking at a strip club before the show. I went to the show, and a fan had pulling up, and he had given me a film canister which had a bunch of Xanax in it. So I took 2 or 3. Todd took 2 or 3, not realizing the combination of a benzo and alcohol is not good.
Historically, not great. Yeah.
And I remember the poor band that opened for us, We Ragazzi. Oh my God, they looked like they were at a horror show. I mean, I remember I have flashes from the show. I have flashes of me running in the street out front chasing a cockroach. Chasing it. I have the next memory is me tumbling off of the stage while we're playing.
Ooh.
Okay?
Yeah.
The next scene is me laying in the middle of the street, spread-eagled, with people around me taking pictures of me.
Oh, man.
With their cell phones. It was just flash after flash after flash. I was sprawled out.
Yeah.
The next scene is me running over to the van. Todd was sitting in there with a bloody gash on his head. He had walked right through a plate glass window door.
Ooh.
And I remember saying to him, "We are going to have a great show tonight. Let's do this. Let's really give them something to remember and something to see." And he looked at me with this blank stare and said, "Dude, it's over.
It already happened, buddy.
We already played."
Wow. Well, that's some epic debauchery right there.
Yes, it really is. And for you kids out there, do not mix Xanax with alcohol.
That's a cautionary tale if ever there was one. But I love that, you went so deep that you're like, but don't worry, we're gonna kill it at the show. And it's like, no, the show already happened, man. That's
Right.
That's great. Something from the comments, and I actually did think about this earlier, but I forgot all about it. There are some untitled songs throughout the discography. Yeah. There's Sang Phat Editor. There's just it's blank. There's just untitled. For a band known for their very evocative and interesting titles, why are there untitled songs? Did those have a special
untitled songs because I did not get to them, or I wasn't able to put it together for that song for whatever reason.
Got it.
That's all.
And those guys were just like, whatever, just call it untitled.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And had they not been like that,
right.
My career would have been significantly shorter. I don't know what he's singing, that idiot.
I don't know.
That retard.
I know what he's on about. Well, and you had in my recollection is that you continued on playing for a while, even with the Purple on Time. I mean, that was what year was that? That was 2003 or something along those lines. There was a few years or so of touring after that. Did it happen abruptly, the end of the band, or was it more of a kind of petering out?
There were probably a couple elements to the ending of the band, and you know how when you get done with the tour and you're all exhausted and you all look at each other like, we're going to rest now.
Yeah.
You know, no practice for 2 weeks. Maybe next month we'll start getting back together. I felt like we had given that look to each other after that record. At the same time, I had gotten the mother of my child pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
She lived in Dubuque, Iowa. Fabulous Dubuque, Iowa. Dubuque, Iowa will smash your senses. That is where I'm at right now, in fact, is the lovely Dubuque, Iowa, the thunderous Dubuque, Iowa, where grown men ride BMX bicycles through the streets. In any case, I had a child on the way, and I wanted to be there for him.
Right.
And things just sort of petered out from there, you know. Yeah, I was driving 3 hours one way to Chicago to practice, and
Yeah, I'll take it out.
you know, but you know, on paper, something that dynamic doesn't last too long, and that's what happened. No bad feelings, no nothing. I love all of those guys. I'm closer to Mark. I've known Mark for the longest. Mark and I talk on a fairly regular basis. I don't talk to Todd much. I have mad respect for him as an artist and as a person.
The whole world of dead writer is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, which I know a little about. You know, I fell away. I fell away from music and the scene and what was happening, and I don't know. I fell away from it. I mean, I suppose I'm inching my way back in. You know, I went to Roadburn this year. You know, that's got to stand for something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I pouted a lot at Roadburn this year. That's what I want to say.
and the Premier Powder Award goes to Al Johnson.
That sad sack over there. Give him the trophy.
It's like an Oscar, but it looks like he's about to cry.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, you know, some good friends of mine are in a band called Bunel.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to be singing on their record.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, Eugene's my dude. That's
Eugene sent me 2 songs a couple of days, maybe a week ago. And I've listened to them a couple of times. I need to start working on that. I need to decide which song and where and what I can do. You know,
great, man.
So,
yeah, and that's what's funny thing about that band, and I have there's an episode that's Eugene for like half of it, and the drummer Franz. Recently, people don't realize here, like that band is very distinguished in Europe.
Right,
like they're in bands that are popular, and people are like, "Who's this singer guy? What's his deal?" Whereas here, it's like, "Oh, it's the guy from Oxbow's new band," and it's first of all not that new. He's been doing it for a while.
I know little about Oxbow because.
Oh, really? Well, it's a Bay Area band, so.
Okay, yeah, and you know, from what I can tell, you know, they made some waves and they were a good band, and there's good words behind that band. After meeting Eugene and finding out and seeing Bunel, I mean, he's such a talented guy.
Oh, he's a powerhouse.
That band is they could be stars. You know, they've got that star power, and he carries it. He leads that star power, and I got mad respect for them too.
It's very immediate too. There's immediacy to Buñuel that is. When I first heard it, kind of took me by surprise. Like, oh wow, that's great. And you got to understand, because like from my perspective, coming to the Bay Area, like Oxbow was like, well, True Heads knew for sure, and then somehow about 10 years ago, I feel like people finally started to like catch up.
Right.
But like, you know, I play shows with them and there'd be like 12 people there.
Yeah, right.
And there's a high quality 12 people, don't get me wrong. But they were not, I feel like that band like didn't get the deference that they deserved. The level of the art was at.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, Marion Faithfull's on this Oxbow record. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, that's awesome.
Right.
And, you know, and there's a lot of bands you can say that about, but what's the crazy thing about Oxbow is like, I feel like the world did kind of catch up to them a little bit. But Buñuel's hits entirely different. It's a different part of the limbic system. Like it's very interesting.
For sure.
So
I mean, the reactions of people at Roadburn was phenomenal. It's Europe, right? It's like you said. You know, if you're an American band and you just focus on Europe and you dress yourself up like mummies and you call yourself the Mummies and you play in Europe constantly, right? You're going to be a phenomenon, whether you like it or not, after about 2 years.
Yeah.
At least that's how it was. I can't really gauge everything so well nowadays, but if you dedicate yourself to Europe and doing the work out there, people are loyal, man. Europeans are loyal, and they're
I've never.
consumers, and it makes for the success of bands.
That's why tons of bands will keep going because they have an audience in Europe. I've never done it. I've always wanted to. We were lined up to do it in 2020, and some stuff happened, so that didn't happen. But yeah, that's a common story. That like bands that can keep, it's like, well, hey, at least we got Europe, right? We can go play there, even if it's 10 people and a dog in Cleveland. So
right.
So let's close things out here, Al. I want to talk a little bit about the Long Hair in 3 Stages, the new version that is available, maroon vinyl.
I really, and it's been so long since I've worked with colored vinyl or enjoyed the aesthetic of it, but it looks really nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm going to pick up a copy. I've only ever had it on CD, so I'm going to pick up a copy of that when I get the chance.
It looks really nice. The whole package looks nice. I know that I can place, if Mark Fisher's involved, it's a carefree endeavor. He does great work.
Yeah, and it's cool for a record that is just so mad influential and has such a place in history amongst the right kind of nerd, such as myself. Right. To have it, again, crazy that it's been as long as it has, but it's nice to see it like have another day in the sun, right? Like that's really cool.
30 years later, come on.
Has there ever been any talk of doing stuff again?
I don't think that is possible. It is possible that, say, maybe Mark and I would work on something together. Mm-hmm. I think that is feasible. I think that Todd is focused on Todd projects and things that he wants to do and people that he's surrounded himself with. We've been offered some big sums to come back, but it's not going to happen, and I'm at peace with that now. I'm at complete peace with that because there's something melancholy about, if the band if U.S. Maple was an influence on you, if it was a record that you loved and this and that, and you saw the band and that whole thing, if you got to see it and it's gone and it's dead, I mean, that's cool. You got those memories, because I know for a fact that while we were playing live and performing those songs, we were trying to create memories.
Yeah. Well, definitely made a lot of memories along the way, and I'm glad we got to do this, man. This is good. It's been a long time coming.
I know. I mean, I guess now you and I are friends.
It's the law.
So I'll be sending you a sympathy card shortly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're supposed to say, I got to send you my address. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Email me your address, and I will send you a picture from the very poor tasteful promo event.
I would absolutely love that. That'd be amazing. Al, this has been great, dude. And last thing I ever do on the show is the only canned question I ever ask, and you can choose to interpret it however you like. But why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because this is one area, being creative, being a character, that I feel very confident in. I feel very good about my interpretations of what I do. I feel like I'm able to entertain. I feel like I'm able to make you maybe think a little bit more about things. I'm just I feel good about it. That's why. It makes me feel good.
Al Johnson, thanks so much, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Take care, brother. There he goes. Al Johnson, U.S. Maple, Shorty. What a cool guy. Let's, well, I think we've got to hear some from Longhair because of that reissue. I mean, we don't have to, but we're going to hear some from Longhair. And you know what? I know what's going to be. We're going to do Letter to ZZ Top. That's their Back in Black as far as I'm concerned. So here we go. Well, there you go. That was a letter to ZZ Top specifically. That is, of course, on the reissue and the non-reissue of Long Hair 3 Stages. You can get that usmaple.bandcamp.com or go to your local skin graft, skingraftrecords.com. Anywhere you get your skin graft goods to pick that up. It looks beautiful. At least the pictures look beautiful. Like I said, I got to pick up a copy for myself. But, yeah. Thank you so very much to Al Johnson for being on the show. That was a pleasure, and it was a long time coming. So I always love when you pull off stuff like that. The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you so very much for listening to it. This show airs usually Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. I'm going to see Devo tomorrow, though, so sorry. And it's always free, protonicreversal.com for the archives. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. The Patreon is advance access, patreon.com/protonicreversal. $1 a month for advance access. For episodes just like this one, just like David J. from Love and Rockets and Bauhaus, and Ralph from Reich Coalition with Reich Coalition News. Later this week, I'm doing 3 episodes this week. I don't want to hear about slacking off, people. So thank you for people to support that, as well as just liking, subscribing on your platform of choice, sharing around, all that good stuff. Helps people find the show. And it beats back the algorithm. That's always a win in my book. So thank you for that.
50,000 watts of power.
Some real exciting news coming up. And eventually we'll get to tell it, and that's going to be great. But for now, thank you so much for listening and your continued listenership and support. It's deeply appreciated.
This microphone turns
Anything else?
sound into
Nah.
electricity.
I think that's enough, isn't it?
Can you
Just
hear
stay
me
safe
now?
out there. And check
Out
your
on Route 128, you're dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? 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 See the radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. There is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio on.